Story 1. As a child, I sneezed while riding my bicycle, and when my head went down, I broke my 2 front teeth on the handlebar. Story 2. I was zipping my jacket up with a little enthusiasm. The zipper caught on some fabric, my hand slipped off the zipper pull, and I punched myself in the face, resulting in a black eye. Story 3. My favorite answer to this question: I cut myself with cheese. Story 4. I laid a 2x4 on a sawhorse to make a bike ramp. The 13th or 14th time I jumped, the board moved. The bike hit the sawhorse and stopped. I flew like Superman and landed on my face. My body carried over and I fractured 2 bones in my neck. Story 5. I bent over to turn down my stereo and my back gave out. I was bedridden for 2 days and still have not recovered. Story 6. Broke my cheekbone doing dumbbell hammer curls on a preacher bench. Burnt my skin when the cat jumped on my lap while I was holding a mug of tea. A common occurrence in my house. Everyone be careful with the kitchen knives. I've just sharpened them. I say, bastard, where are the steri strips and the plasters? I ask a couple of hours later. Story 7. I caught a strange whiff and lifted my foot to my face to smell, just in case. I heard and felt a tearing sound in my knee and was limping and in pain for a few weeks afterward. Story 8. I was finishing mounting a fan on a transmission cooler for a car I was building. For some reason, while the fan was on, I tried to stop it with my finger. I have no idea why that seemed like a good idea, but it nearly took my finger off. Story 9. Burned my actual eyeball with a hot curling iron trying to get my 1980s bangs just right. Story 10. I was at a park when a monster goose chased me onto a tree that had fallen over a creek. While attempting to escape by running over the tree, I slipped, hit my ribs, and slowly slid off the side into the water, landing on rocks. The goose still bit me. In my defense, the goose was 8 feet tall and had fangs. Story 11. I punched the floor while watching an Ohio State University football game. I broke my knuckle but did not do anything for weeks until I received a handshake from a supplier that almost knocked me down in pain. Story 12. I was watching the Great British Bake Off when I was shocked by a decision. I kicked my leg, felt a pop, and couldn't run for months. Story 13. Okay, I have a really good one for this. Let me first preface this with some information. First, I am transgender. Second, my family didn't know I am transgender, and them finding out would have been really bad at the time of this story. Third, I had just gotten a job at a grocery store. Because I was living with my family and the job paid about $3 over minimum wage at the time, I had a lot of disposable income that I was using on nice things I always wanted. New shoes, new clothes, cool knives, feminine clothes, first aid kits. After listing that, I'm sure you can tell where the problem is coming from. Also, my family doesn't have their priorities straight because 3 of those things are necessities, but when I presented them to my family, they were treated as luxury. But I digress. Picture me, sitting in the basement converted into my room. I didn't want to wake people and this was better for sleeping since the job was night shift. Dressed feminine because that was the only time I could while being closeted. I decided I was bored and started playing with 2 really nice knives I had bought. One of them I thought wasn't very sharp, so I tried cutting index cards with it and couldn't. Then I tried chopping them and it worked very well. I did another and another and another. I was chopping these index cards into small, less than 1 inch squares. Suddenly it occurred to me that this was ridiculously dangerous and could easily cut into my finger. I said out loud to myself, "One more couldn't hurt," and chopped right into my finger like a character on a sitcom. Now I was bleeding, in a basement, thinking I just outed myself, because I felt like I was going into shock from a panic attack while in pain and bleeding profusely. I thought they were going to find me in the basement, Amazon basic skirt, stockings, super feminine attire, on the floor covered in blood, passed out. I ended up sitting on the bathroom floor, squeezing my finger wrapped in paper towel, as much as I could until my panic attack passed and my vision cleared. Then I remembered the smarter purchase I made. I used my first aid kit to patch up my finger so I could change and get driven to urgent care nearby. Do not let anyone ever tell you a first aid kit is a dumb purchase. Story 14. Walking across deck joists building a deck. I had a 16-foot-long 2x6 on my shoulder and carelessly stepped between a joist, forgetting that there was no deck built yet. Story 15. I broke my wrist while jumping on a pogo stick and talking to a girl in gym class. Story 16. Ate an edible. Lost my balance walking down a flight of stairs. Sprained my shoulder badly. Story 17. I got hold of a good safety razor. Somehow, I managed to get the blades out of it and tried cutting the main electricity line to my house with it. I got an electric shock and burned my fingers badly. I was 6 years old at that time. Story 18. Got angry at my computer and kicked a cement wall. I broke my big toe. Story 19. Weight lifting in high school. Coaches pushing you past the point of total burnout and screaming at you to keep going. Any good form is gone at this point, and injuries happened often. Story 20. Pot of boiling water making pasta. The handle of the pot suddenly detached, and I quickly caught the falling pot with my other hand. I normally do not have such great reflexes. Burns on my hand, arm, and stomach. Story 21. I walk to the trash can outside every other morning. The ground is flat. I did not trip or step on anything. I simply took a completely ordinary step and suddenly felt pain in my knee. Turns out I sprained it while walking completely normally. I have no idea how. I blame turning 41. Story 22. Tripped over my own foot while trying to look cool in front of friends. Ended up with a bruised ego and a skinned knee. Definitely not cool. Story 23. In 6th or 7th grade, I thrust our wooden flagpole into the front porch light cover and cut my chin as a result. The silver lining was that I had a ready-made Halloween costume since this happened 2 to 3 days before. Story 24. I had my rolled-up sleeping bag on the floor in my room. I thought I could fall backward and not get hurt because the sleeping bag would catch my fall. In theory, it worked, but I did not check how much space I had in my room. While I did not slam my body on the floor, my head hit my wooden desk chair, and I split my head open. I had to get staples put in my head. Story 25. During karaoke, a drunk coworker started swinging the microphone by the cord. It hit the fake part of my front tooth. A story for another day. And it fell out. That was fun. Story 26. I was holding a pair of inexpensive sunglasses and having an argument with my wife about something trivial. I allowed myself to get so angry that I crushed them in my hand, cutting my thumb and needing stitches. She took me to get treated because she still loved me, even though I was a twit with a temper. She still does. That was over 20 years ago, before parenthood, and now we are about to become empty nesters. Story 27. I was spinning around a pole that was holding up a giant tent, and the pole fell on my face and eye. I had to wear an eye patch for a while. Story 28. I broke my thumb doing box jumps. I tripped on the box, fell forward, and landed right on the joint of my thumb. Story 29. I melted a Ritz cracker wrapper with a lighter, and it dripped on my hand, causing small third-degree burns. Unrelatedly, that was also the first time I got high. Story 30. Tripped over a basketball while walking and broke my arm in 2 places. Story 31. Decided I could not wait any longer to take the trash out while the apartment stairs were iced over. I fell down about 5 to 6 steps and then slid down more on my tailbone. I am pretty sure these back problems a couple of years later are due to that. Story 32. I walked into a low-hanging street sign in a parking lot and got a concussion. Story 33. I intentionally touched my leg with a hot glue gun to see how hot it was. It was hot enough to make my skin bubble. But here is the best part. I did this while I was in gifted and talented education. Yes, I was considered gifted and talented. Story 34. I told someone the truth. I told her it was not wise to ask me things like that. Story 35. I was curious if a stapler would be strong enough to punch through my thumbnail. It was. Story 36. Face planted on the sidewalk tripping over my Halloween costume. Gave myself a black eye. Story 37. I gave myself a concussion in high school English class. I was laughing very hard at my terrible mock advanced placement exam score. I laughed loudly and rolled my head back into a metal filing cabinet. It made a loud thud. Everyone stopped and asked if I was okay. I insisted I was fine until the room started to spin a bit, and I hobbled to the nurse's office. It turned out my mock exam score was one of the better ones in my class. Story 38. My finger got stuck in my zipper when I was trying to pull it. It really hurt. Another reason why I don't like skinny jeans. Story 39. I sliced my palm wide open putting a tiki torch in the ground. I still have that scar. To this day, if I see a tiki torch, I immediately give it a wide berth. Full disclosure, I always assumed it was spelled wide berth. But it just occurred to me that is an odd phrase. So, I double-checked right before posting. I am 40 years old. Story 40. I'm only in my late 20s and not eating enough fiber. Now I'm scheduled for surgery this week to remove part of my colon because I keep getting flare-ups from my diverticulitis. Eat your fiber, kids. It doesn't matter how you get it. Just get it in you. It will save you a lot of hassle when you're older. I just happened to be a case where this progressed quickly. Please keep me in your prayers. Everyone. Thank you. I survived and am 1 month post-surgery, feeling great and eating lots of fiber from fruits, vegetables, and psyllium husk. Story 41. I was cutting a bagel, holding the bottom of it flat with my hand, and cutting from top down. You can probably put 2 and 2 together. I have done that 2 or 3 times, and it is incredibly stupid. Story 42. I slipped on a rock during a hiking trail because I was rushing. Story 43. Occasionally, my right arm gives out due to an injury I sustained in 7th grade. A broken arm that pinched a nerve and did not heal correctly. In 11th grade, I decided it would be a great idea to put 2 desks close to each other. I propped myself onto my hands, lifted myself off the ground, and began swinging between the 2 desks. Of course, my right arm gave out mid-swing, and I ended up hitting my jaw against the solid wooden and metal-reinforced surface of the desk. After putting my jaw back in place, I had to leave school, and a parent took me to get an X-ray to make sure nothing was broken. I probably had a concussion, which would not have been my first, so the day is somewhat a blur even though I am in my 30s now. Story 44. Camping in a state park when I was younger. I forget how young, but I think elementary school age. We went into a gift shop, and I wanted a pocket knife that had my name on it. It was one of those small pocket knives with a blade, file, and scissors. My dad convinced my mom to let me have it. We went back to the campsite, and my dad showed me how to whittle a stick. He told me to always whittle away from yourself and not toward yourself. I was working on one stick, and there was a little nub that I couldn't get off because of how it was angled. Everyone went into the trailer to work on dinner, and I stayed outside to whittle. When I saw my parents were out of sight, I decided to try and whittle that nub going toward myself, which is exactly what my dad said not to do. Well, the brand new pocket knife blade went right into my thumb. Blood came pouring out, and I screamed. My parents came running out and saw what happened. My mom said if we were close to a hospital, she would have taken me for stitches. I'm 30 now, and the scar is still there. Story 45. I overextended my knee in the shower. I am not sure how. My knee hurts permanently now. Story 46. Slipped on a wet floor in a commercial kitchen. I stuck both hands out in front of me as I slid forward into the sink. My left hand was impaled by the cold water faucet handle, which was pointed directly at me. It went all the way through. I had many bruises, some stitches, but no permanent damage. Story 47. I had a hot cup of tea and was changing seating positions on the couch. I spilled the entire cup on my hip and gave myself 2nd and 3rd degree burns. I got a cool scar but a silly story out of it. Story 48. Tripped over my own feet in front of the executive offices. Security had to come out and help me up. I scraped my palm breaking the fall, which means I had to get a tetanus shot and workers' compensation was involved. Story 49. Running to first base in a kickball game. Severely sprained my ankle on both sides simultaneously. The doctor said I would have been better off breaking it. It has been 5 years and it is still painful and swells often. Yes, I did physical therapy and was out of work for 5 months and followed all the steps. Subsequently, the most pain came from gaining weight due to being immobile and depressed for months, and not being able to exercise because of the pain and fear. Story 50. Pointed at something with my index finger and somehow pulled the muscle in that finger. It hurt for 2 weeks. Story 51. I had a spare room that I used for storage for a couple of years, so the room was quite crowded. I had a television I was no longer using, propped up against some other items. While trying to enter the room to grab something, I scraped my leg on the corner of the television. It was not a sharp part like the mounting bracket, just the front corner. The scrape left a deep cut, about 3 inches long, on my calf. Story 52. Hurricane Harvey came, and we stayed in a hotel for a month. We came back home after repairs were made, and I tried to do an overhead press with just the 35-pound bar after not working out for over a month. I tore my labrum in my left shoulder with just the bar. It was a mistake, and although my shoulder does not need surgery, I cannot work out fully the way I want to. If I do chest exercises on Monday, my shoulder probably will not be ready for another workout until Thursday or Friday. It is frustrating, but that is how it is. Story 53. I was sitting on the toilet waiting for a second urination. My feet fell asleep. When I stood up, I instantly fell over because I had no sensation at all in my feet. I landed awkwardly on my ankle and foot. I had to hobble and crawl to the bed and wait for sensation to return while writhing in pain. I was quite sure I had broken something in my foot due to the pain and immediate bruising. I went to urgent care a short while later for x-rays and had to awkwardly explain how I injured myself. Fortunately, there were no fractures, just a sprained ankle and a bruised foot. Story 54. Reached for something. Neck twisted itself. Getting old is difficult. Story 55. My friend's story. We were snowboarding a couple of years ago when we were 12. My friend was going about 15 miles per hour down the hill. When he reached the bottom, he completely wiped out. Unfortunately, he ended up with testicular torsion, but he didn't realize how serious it was right away. For about 4 days, he kept going to school, constantly complaining about the pain. Eventually, he went to the emergency room. After emergency surgery, he was left with only one functioning testicle. My story. I have a drift tricycle that I outfitted with red and blue lights just for fun. It's one of those push drift trikes, and the road I live on has a really steep grade. Unfortunately, the trike has no brakes. One time, I tried to stop by dragging my foot on the ground, and my ankle twisted completely backward. I ended up with the worst sprain of my life. I had to get a splint and then wear a boot for a couple of months because I couldn't walk for long periods without it. Story 56. Playing high school baseball, I snapped my ankle and realized I wasn't really that good. It wasn't going to make me any money, so it wasn't worth playing anymore and risking further injury. Story 57. I walked into my new house, moving boxes from the truck inside, smashed my forehead on the glass chandelier in the empty kitchen, and laid myself out flat. I had walked past that thing probably 20 times before I did that. A memorable way to meet your new neighbors. Also, I jumped off the top of a half pipe and my shoelace got hooked on a nail. I landed head first on the grass. Skateboarding home, I hit a pebble. The board stopped. I didn't. I fell face first onto the blacktop at speed. Riding my bike with no hands, coasting down a hill, my front tire hit a rock and turned sideways, flipping me over the handlebars and tumbling the rest of the way down the hill. While rollerblading down a different hill, I swerved to avoid a car. There was no sidewalk, just mud. I tried to jump it but didn't quite make it and dislocated my collarbone. Story 58. I pulled a back muscle picking up a 12-pack of soda at the grocery store. I am 51 years old. Story 59. Pickleball. Recovering from anterior cruciate ligament replacement surgery at the moment. Story 60. Sliced an inch long into my palm with a fish knife while trying to wash it with a sponge. The blade was facing the sponge. I forgot that these knives are professionally sharpened every week when I worked at a butcher shop. The knife cut clean through the sponge and my hand. Story 61. The viral vegetable chopper, but not while using it to chop anything. My brain just malfunctioned while I was cleaning the sharp grit piece. Goodbye to the tip of my finger. Story 62. I walked into the edge of a filing cabinet at work and broke my left thumb through the joint. I have arthritis in it now. Story 63. I have pulled a back muscle while washing myself in the shower. Story 64. I was getting off a train in India. Both doors had been opened, so I fell onto the tracks. Story 65. Trying to cut a frozen bagel with a very sharp knife while holding the bagel vertically in my hand. I can now say that getting stitches on fingers hurts a lot. I was careless. Do not do that. Story 66. I was closer to the ceiling fan than I originally thought and ended up breaking my pointer and middle fingers while changing my shirt one morning. Tall people problems. Story 67. Washing my hair in the shower. Normally, I threw my neck out. Story 68. I was doing a conga line while ice skating when someone pushed the line over like dominoes, and we all fell. The back of a figure skate went right through my leg. Story 69. I jumped from a tree and landed on a plank of wood. Came up and hit me in the face, giving me a large black eye. Story 70. Running around in a creek under a bridge. I slipped, and a long rusty nail impaled my middle toe. I was lucky to have a good mom who took me straight to urgent care after scolding me. I received antibiotics and was fine, but I thought I might have hit a nerve at first because the pain was so precise and terrible. Story 71. I was riding my bike and went through a puddle, which splashed a worm onto my bare thigh just seconds before a beetle or some other hard bug hit me on the forehead. I flipped over my handlebars and skidded to a stop on the pavement. Another time, I tried to go up a down escalator because I couldn't find the up escalator. I tripped and fell down the escalator. Story 72. Playing manhunt at night and hiding on top of my dad's van. When I was spotted, I quickly got up and scurried off the top. However, I didn't see the car antenna, which then hit my eye. Fortunately, my bottom eyelid protected me, and the worst I had was just a red eye for a couple of weeks. Story 73. I got into an argument with someone over the phone, and I got so mad I punched a tree that did not have bark on it and broke 2 fingers. I was on 3/4 doses of Percocet as well and did not know it was broken. My friends made me go to the hospital where I saw the x-ray and my bones were smashed. They gave me another pain medication that was probably like hydrocodone or something, likely because they did not know I was on 40 milligrams of Percocet. Story 74. I was making gelatin shots for a rugby party. I was drinking the vodka the whole time and was pretty drunk by the time I had filled about 500 paper cups. I was using a large glass bowl that was very heavy and a turkey baster to fill the cups. There was some of the mixture left in the bowl, and if you have ever played rugby, one of the cardinal rules was, "Thou shalt not waste liquor." I'm serious. If you were a rookie and spilled a beer, you would get a straw if you were lucky, and have to clean it up off the table, floor, or ground. So I picked up this bowl that probably weighed at least 4 pounds empty and went to drink the leftovers. I accidentally hit it into my face, chipped my tooth, and got vodka and blue gelatin mix in my eyes, all over myself, the floor, and the walls. I tried to play it off as a rugby accident, but I was a very fast runner and hardly ever got tackled, so there were a lot of questions. Story 75. 6 weeks ago in beautiful Black Mountain, North Carolina, I was jogging home. I saw a group of people up ahead in a dogleg curve on the sidewalk. I called out to them, "Coming through, y'all." They parted. Everyone moved to one side of the sidewalk except one person, a woman. As soon as I got across from her, she stuck out her foot and tripped me. I fell on my left knee, then on the left side of my face. It knocked me out cold. When I came to, the paramedic was telling me, "Don't move your left leg. There is a bone sticking out of it." It shattered my left kneecap and tore the ligaments. I had surgery the next morning. I am doing well in my recovery. I have forgiven her, but no one can figure out who she is or what vehicle she left in. There are no doorbell cameras or other means to track her group to their vehicle. Be careful jogging in Black Mountain, North Carolina. Story 76. I was in a hurry wrapping a belt around my fist to make it small enough to pack, and the big metal buckle swung around and hit me on my right testicle. Felt like I was shot in the testicle. I fell to the ground and almost vomited from the pain. Came out of nowhere. Story 77. Let her back into my life when she was recently single and looking for male attention. Story 78. Fell asleep cross-legged on the floor. Woke up with the worst muscle cramp. Story 79. I shattered my kneecap and tore 3 ligaments hitting a piñata. Story 80. I stabbed myself in the face with a screwdriver. I was trying to pry something open, and the screwdriver slipped, going right towards my face. I missed stabbing myself in the eye by about 1/4 of an inch. Story 81. I hit the top of my head on the side of the door frame. Story 82. I was at the trailhead of Delicate Arch in Arches National Park, Utah. I decided to throw a rock with my left hand, even though I am right-handed, and tore the meniscus in my right knee. Story 83. I was stopped at a train, and my foot was on my brake absent-mindedly. I sneezed, and when my chest compressed, the seatbelt tightened and crushed my rib cage. They were bruised but not broken. Story 84. I was very drunk and smoking a cigarette. I brought it to my mouth to take a pull, but I missed, and the cigarette was turned the wrong way. I burned my face. It was not as bad as it sounds. It did not leave a permanent mark, but I had a scab on my face for about a week. Story 85. Fell flat out of my car while getting out and dropped my bag and a full cup of coffee all over the street. Scraped up my hip. Story 86. Became extremely intoxicated. When exiting the sport utility vehicle, I failed to extend my legs first. I landed on my knee, resulting in a broken kneecap, a fractured foot, and a sprained ankle. Story 87. Put the tow hitch on the back of my Jeep. Then my girlfriend at the time's dog took off out the front door. I tried to go after it and I smacked my kneecap on the ball of the hitch. Story 88. Dislocated my shoulder swatting at flies. I had previously dislocated it several times, so the joint was loose enough for that to happen. Story 89. I injured my eye on the corner of a paper towel dispenser at school. Story 90. In the 1980s, I thought it was funny to sit on my knees facing the back of a rocking chair and repeatedly rock it backward, pressing my hands and face against the window. It was only funny the first few times before I went through the plate glass window. Story 91. Losing my right index finger after doing what my supervisor told me to do. Story 92. Tried to learn to surf when I moved to California. Rode a wave all the way in, stepped off the board at a weird angle, and broke my leg. Story 93. I stepped over a gas hose while pumping gas, breaking the 5th metatarsal in my right foot. I received a plate and 7 screws to repair it. Story 94. I was playing for square, and the kid next to me slammed his hand into mine and sprained my thumb. Story 95. Trying to bite into a frozen Snickers bar and it snapped off in a way that slashed my cheek and poked me in the eye. Story 96. Jumped out of a helicopter onto a live bull and fell off. Story 97. I cut my finger with a saw. When I saw the doctor, he said those power saws were dangerous. I told him it was a hand saw. He told me not to tell anyone about that part. Story 98. Tripped over a case of French fries and broke my shoulder in 2 places. Story 99. When I was 8 or 9, I was riding my bike with a recorder in my mouth. I went up a curb, and the curved mouthpiece scraped the back of my throat, carved out a chunk right above my tonsils. I brought the piece of my throat to the hospital, thinking they would put it back in. I can still feel the chunk sitting on my tongue. Story 100. Playing fruit volleyball and a flying cantaloupe smoked my head and gave me a concussion. Story 101. I thought I was fast as a kid and belly flopped into a bunch of rose bushes. I have scars all over my body to remind me of that one. Story 102. Demonstrating to my friend how I recently avoided a cycling accident by dodging a surprise car door in rainy traffic with fresh tires on dry ground. I flipped over the handlebars. Story 103. I was exposed to United States Department of Agriculture toxins in food, drink, personal products, cleaners, and medicines, which led to side effects. These were approved by flawed studies and were not studied over generations before being released to the public, as indicated necessary by modern science. Now, psychiatric fraudsters try to silence those who have learned the truth and talk about it. Story 104. When I was in 3rd or 4th grade doing homework at the kitchen table, I had the pencil gripped in my fist with the lead end sticking up and the eraser end touching the table. I sneezed and jabbed the lead tip into my forehead. I am currently 25, and you can still see the piece of lead in my forehead plain as day. Story 105. Apparently, I'm not particularly attached to my thumbs. One day, about 5 years ago, it was cold, and there had been freezing rain causing my car to ice over. I tried to open my passenger door, but it was frozen in place. I jumped into the car from the driver's side so I could open and close the passenger door. When I pulled the handle, my thumb touched my wrist and I heard a pop. I thought, I'm going to feel this when I warm up. I was right. Another time, with the opposite hand, I was putting an IKEA couch together. I couldn't get the pieces to line up. I forced them, and in the process heard a very audible snap. There goes the other thumb. I also injured the ulnar nerves in both arms playing Wii Sports. I started with my left hand and developed neuropathy from the nerve being displaced. Then I switched to my right hand and did the same thing. I didn't want surgery as a kid, so I avoided it. That was a long-standing bad idea. Now I'm on my insurance with my deductible. Story 106. Tried pulling the blanket up to my face but was stuck on my pregnancy pillow. I punched myself in the face and made my nose bleed. This was last week. Story 107. My friend and I finished raking leaves and put them in the green waste bin. We still had more leaves and needed to make room. We decided to stand on opposite sides of the green waste bin and push down on the count of 3. We accidentally bumped heads so hard that I blacked out for a few moments. Story 108. Stood up too fast. Had COVID-19. Lights out. Face planted. Lost 2 teeth and had a concussion. Also received a hospital bill. Story 109. I was riding a children's tricycle and looked back to show everyone I was doing it. They yelled for me to stop, and the next thing I knew, I slammed into a parked car and hit the pavement hard. I lost a tooth, and my whole face was covered in scratches. I cried until I realized I lost a tooth and then felt happy. I still have the scars to this day. Story 110. Last month, I spilled boiling hot water on my hand by lifting a coffee cup too quickly. Story 111. Once my brother and I took turns racing a bicycle across our yard to get the best time. I went too fast when I reached the end of the yard, went down a small hill, caught the bike on some big rocks at the bottom, and fell face first into the dirt. We were timing manually, and I was too focused on the time to slow down before going over the hill. While crying after the accident, I argued with my brother that I had beaten his time. Another time, we were riding bikes in opposite directions on the road. I had the sun in my eyes and did not think to stop because I was blinded. Instead of stopping or getting out of the way, my brother tried to wave and yell to me. Our front tires collided, and we both flew over our handlebars, headbutting each other and falling to the ground. On another occasion, we were celebrating the 4th of July, throwing firecrackers into random water puddles. He lit one too close to the base of the fuse, panicked, and threw it right by my head. Felt like my ear was melting. Charles Darwin is rolling in his grave. Story 112. I sprained my ankle after slipping on bread on the floor. Story 113. I was riding my bicycle when I was 5 years old. I was not looking ahead and ran my face into 2 back-to-back mailboxes, losing a front tooth. Story 114. I put my foot through a glass shower door when my friends broke in to pour cold water on me. I had 34 stitches, and my big toe does not move upward. Story 115. My brother and I rode a folded-up gymnastics mat down our basement stairs. At the bottom of the stairs was a trash can, and inside it was a piece of plate glass. Well, guess who stuck his hands out to regain balance when he got to the bottom? That same person got a deep gash from the sharp corner of the plate glass. Now, he has a scar on his hand that he will have for the rest of his life as a reminder of that unfortunate day as a kid. Story 116. Cleaning my room, I tripped over a hanger, landed on the corner of my bed frame, and broke my rib. Story 117. Car surfing. My unlicensed friend hit a curve at 75 miles per hour and flipped my car while I was on top. I had a little road rash, that's it. Not sure how I am alive. We recorded it on video, but I am not sure where it went. I bet the police still have it. Story 118. 3 of us were playing street football with 1 designated quarterback, 1 running back and a wide receiver, and 1 defender in the winter. Snow had piled up everywhere after the plows had come through. I made an amazing over-the-shoulder catch near the sideline while running at full speed. I was well past the marker for a touchdown but felt like a professional player at the moment and decided to finish the play with a headfirst dive into the snowbank along the sideline. It was a total impressive move. Unfortunately, the fire hydrant did not agree. Story 119. Made my own zip line as a kid between a building and a tree. Story 120. Baseball injury 24 stitches. I was at a ball field in a park with some friends. Avas and my Lautatians. We started playing wiffle ball, but it was too windy. Because of the wind, we pitched from about half the usual distance from the mound to home plate. I decided to stay at that same distance when we switched to real baseball. I took a line drive straight to my left eye. I was wearing sunglasses that were destroyed by the impact of the ball. I had a laceration along my orbital bone and was extremely fortunate not to have any fractures. 15 years later, I have a noticeable scar around my eye, but I am no worse for wear. Story 121. Walking across my daughter's room, I slipped on a sock she had left on the floor. X-rays and computed tomography scan showed a cracked bone in my ankle. My foot was in a cast for 6 weeks. Story 122. I have sprained an ankle while trying to kick and untangle my sheets and comforter. Story 123. My dad said, "Don't touch the motorcycle." I asked, "Why not?" What he should have said is, "It's very hot, and you'll get third-degree burns all over the surface of your hand, requiring multiple painful surgeries to repair." What he actually said was, "Because I said so." We both learned something that day. I was 4. Story 124. We have a simple desktop clock with a large LCD display that syncs to the radio signal to stay accurate. It runs on 2 AA batteries. One time when changing the batteries, they did not want to come out. So I flipped it over and struck it against the heel of my other hand, similar to how you would play a tambourine. The sharp edge of the battery compartment cut into my wrist. I have a scar there today, some 10 years later. Story 125. Racing a bus down a hill on a bicycle. I ran into the back of a parked Chevrolet Nova. Story 126. I was really hungover and home alone. I walked halfway down the stairs and noticed a nail sticking out of the wall that I had never seen before. Then it got weirder as I thought I saw the nail moving across the wall and upwards. The nail was not moving. I had leaned forward and was falling down the stairs. I bruised my shoulder and cut my face. I was kind of lucky I did not break anything. Story 127. I once fell into a boat and sprained my ankle. I also fell up a flight of stairs and bruised my knee. Story 128. I broke my hand catching a garter at a wedding reception. A small person in front of me tried to grab it at the same time I did but grabbed my hand instead. I broke my metacarpal. Story 129. I almost broke my ankle on a sprinkler while running away from my friend who was swinging a bamboo stick at me. Story 130. I grabbed a metal applewood smoker tin right off the hot grill with my bare hands. Story 131. I had to explain at the hospital after I came in with a cracked rib, bruised lung, and a hematoma following an intense game of Catch the Arrow. Story 132. I tried to peel a sticker off a watermelon with a knife. I have a permanent scar on my left pointer finger. Story 133. I was at summer camp and I had a plastic cup for water that I had finished. Like any kid, I decided to play by suctioning it to my face. I ended up with a deep purple ringed bruise around my mouth because apparently I just sucked that hard. Story 134. I had to explain at the hospital after I came in with a cracked rib, bruised lung, and a hematoma following an intense game of Catch the Arrow. Story 135. I have caught my glasses when lifting my shirt, causing a cut on my forehead. Story 136. A travel mug full of boiling hot water slipped out of the cup holder and into my seat. I had severe blisters all down my backside. Story 137. Vacuuming. Weird tiny landing at the top of the stairs. Turned around and fell off the landing. Caught myself only a quarter of the way down, but when I did, I dislocated my ankle and broke both bones in my leg. Seeing my foot flopping was not as strange as you might think. Probably from shock. After a plate and 9 screws later, all is better. Story 138. Adjusting my bra strap at the bowling alley. I went to the restroom and noticed my breasts were crooked. This aggravated an old shoulder injury as I tried to fix it without taking the strap off. I had a horrible third game. Story 139. My body violently jerks in my sleep and I punched a wall. Story 140. I tripped on air, fell over sideways, and spiral fractured my fifth metatarsal. I also badly sprained my thumb once while playing spoons. Story 141. When I was a teenager, I was riding bikes with my cousin at a skateboard park. I remember taking my bike way up a ramp. I got on my bike and shoved off. There was no ramp. It was a straight drop onto concrete. I landed headfirst, blacked out for a second, and woke up with a bloody nose. After my cousin was done laughing, we went back to his mom's. She started freaking out and said we were going to the hospital immediately. Mom and Dad showed up. After waiting 5 hours, finally a doctor saw me. Turned out I fractured my skull. I had to spend a month recovering. When I got back home and looked in the mirror, it made sense why everyone was freaking out. I looked rough, black eyes, puffy cheeks. Last time I ride without a helmet. Story 142. A few years ago, I accidentally tossed myself in the face while trying to light a joint. It knocked me out completely. Yesterday, I sliced the top of my thumb down to the bone using a box cutter while trying to remove a booger stuck under my nail. Last month, I dislocated my shoulder when I hit the front brake on my mini motorcycle while attempting to jump a curb. Story 143. I used to be a manager in a movie theater. As the ushers were cleaning, I popped my head in to see if they were almost done. They didn't see me, and one of them threw a push broom handle toward where I was standing. He had 2 trash cans to wheel up. It hit me square in the middle of the forehead. I flew back from the force and hit the wall. The bump immediately swelled to about 2 inches. It went down with an ice pack, but it looked crazy for a few days. Story 144. I was 7 years old, and I jumped onto my bed face first without seeing my iPad in front of me. I landed on my iPad, which somehow caused me to get a black eye, break my nose, and knock out 3 baby teeth, all just from jumping onto my bed. Story 145. I came down a single step, right onto the hose that was filling so I could water some plants, and ended up breaking my ankle. This was 9 weeks after I came down 2 steps with a few bags in hand, lost my balance, and broke my ankle when I fell. Story 146. I was in high school and wanted to see how fast I could run backwards. Not even 4 steps in, I fell and broke my left wrist. The worst part was that the staff and gym teachers were laughing so hard that they took a long time to realize I was actually in a great deal of pain. Story 147. I took a white Corningware casserole dish out of the oven without any hot pads. I burned both my hands. Of course, it was dinner, and the casserole ended up on the floor while I ended up in the emergency room. I think my brain thought, oh, it's white, so it's not hot. Story 148. If I turn my head all the way to the right and yawn, a bone or something pops and it causes a lot of pain. So yawning. Story 149. Holding my baby sister and rollerblading at the same time. I broke my arm because I was holding her with one hand and did not want to let go. All the weight went on one arm and it broke. Story 150. I fell out of a tree from about 15 feet up. A vine caught me between the legs just before I hit the ground. I might not be able to have children anymore, but I can still walk. Story 151. When you are trimming the vegetables, do not cut towards your hand. I sliced my thumb open down to the bone. Story 152. I had a cat carrier in my hand while walking down a porch with 3 steps. I felt something roll inside the carrier and looked down to check. I tripped off the first step and ended up landing wrong, breaking my foot in 3 places. We never ended up needing the carrier. Story 153. Funny because I literally just slit my whole thumb open washing a pair of tongs. Story 154. I tripped over an irrigation hose, fell out of a raised garden bed with a heavy backpack on, and snapped my arm bone clean in 2. I was then stuck on the floor because of my heavy bag and stayed there for about 20 to 30 minutes. Story 155. I used a steak knife to cut open a bag of frozen vegetables and almost cut off my fingertip. This is why I now use the proper tools for a job. Story 156. I fell off the twin bed in my dorm and slipped on the floor twice, once going up and once coming down. I hit my head on the edge of the wall behind me both times in the exact same way. I had a bumpy head and a mild headache for a couple of days. Story 157. I put a toothpick on the floor and placed my foot over it, so that it lined up exactly between my big toe and middle toe. I then slid and slammed my foot into the wall, and the toothpick stabbed right between my toes. It was very painful. I thought the toothpick would slide right under my foot, but it was angled and did not. Story 158. I was in a talent show of sorts in college. I had just finished my whole speech and was going down the stairs when the lights went out. I managed to trip and literally fall down the stairs in front of everyone. Not 10 minutes before, there had been an announcement about being careful on the stairs. That was pretty embarrassing. Another time, I was riding my electric bike and decided to go behind the buildings of the strip mall even though I knew there were potholes. Long story short, I hit one while cruising, fell sideways and tried to catch myself. The bike dragged me down. I got a concussion, a sprained arm, bruises the size of my palm, and cuts. That was by far my worst injury, all because I wanted to shave a few minutes off my travel time. This one isn't mine. It's my dad's, but it's pretty funny. He was running a Boy Scout camp and had just finished telling the scouts not to run on the trails because there were roots that could trip them up. Later in the day, he got a call on his walkie-talkie that a scout was injured by the lake. He took off running almost there when suddenly he caught his foot under a root and literally broke his ankle. For the rest of camp, the scouts mocked him by saying, "No running on the trails." The worst part was he had to set his own foot because the country hospital didn't have enough doctors. Yes, my dad is tough. He proceeded to break that ankle 2 more times, which I don't understand. How can anyone break the same ankle 3 times? Story 159. I was dating a new girl and had been together for a month. We had just become intimate a few days earlier, and I was about to leave for a 10-day European work trip. So we decided to be a bit more vigorous during our goodbye. I was lying on my back on the bed, and she was bouncing away when suddenly I heard and felt a loud crack and an incredibly sharp pain in my lower back. I groaned in pain, and she misunderstood and screamed something I will not repeat here, since we were both relatively new together. I was in my early 30s and she was in her mid-20s. I was a bit embarrassed to acknowledge the injury because it made me feel old, so I powered through until we both finished despite the awful pain. Afterward, I realized with shock that I could not really feel my legs. I tried to wiggle my toes, but they did not move. I began to panic. I spent the next few minutes focusing heavily on trying to move my toes, like the bride in the movie Kill Bill. To my immense relief, it started to work. She was lying there obliviously. She eventually left around 2 a.m., and my flight was at 10 a.m. I took some ibuprofen and went to sleep. When I got up to catch my flight, my back was so sore I couldn't straighten myself for almost 5 minutes. This was the worst 16-hour flight of my life. I could not find a comfortable position and was up and down nearly the whole time. The entire trip was a blur of pain and insomnia. When I got back almost 2 weeks later, I went to the doctor, and he basically scolded me for being careless. I had a scan. Can't remember if it was an MRI, CT, or X-ray, and it turned out I had dislocated a disc that pinched a nerve in my lower back. It took months of physical therapy before I had my range of motion back. It's been almost 17 years now. The girl and I got married and have 3 kids. She knows I have constant lower back pain, but she thinks it's from a high school football injury. I still haven't told her the real reason. Probably never will. Story 160. Pushing a knife into a plastic bottle. I was surprised when it finally went through and came out the other side, also passing through one of my fingers holding the bottle. Story 161. I stapled my finger once as a careless elementary school student. That incident still haunts me to this day. Story 162. Running out to the porch to watch a Lockheed C-130 Hercules fly over. I tripped down concrete steps while craning my head upward. Story 163. When I was around 10, I was hanging in the woods with some friends. We wanted to build a fort and have our own fire pit. There was an old foundation and remnants of a building nearby. I grabbed a cinder block and placed it on the ground. I planned to smash it into a couple of pieces for the fire pit wall. I got On my knees in front of it, raised the hammer over my head, and gave it a good whack. To be honest, it felt great smashing it, so I got a little overenthusiastic after a couple more swings. On the fourth or fifth swing, I brought it up a little too fast and a little too high. At a slight angle, one of the claws on the back of the hammer slammed into the top back left side of my head. It got stuck. Took some effort to pop it back out. I put my hand over the wound and ran home. When I got in the house, my mom saw the look on my face and asked what happened. I must have been keeping good pressure on it because when I took my hand away, it was bad, really bad. I immediately felt hot blood run down the back and side of my neck. I felt my shirt getting hot and clinging to me. My mom screamed. Everything after that, until I got to the hospital, is a little fuzzy. I got a few stitches. No major damage. But there is a small dent there that I can feel with my finger. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.